Hey everybody, welcome to Arcane Mark. We're going to do Toolbox, relationships between characters. There is a lot going on. We'll go through very quickly before the episode starts. I say quickly because there's still a lot of smoke and particulate matter in the air around here. So we're going to try to do a pretty fast episode, and depending on how this works, it looks like the forecast is going to be cleared up by Thursday, but if it still isn't on Saturday and this is being a little too heated and too much smoke, we may have to skip out on Saturday. So we'll keep you up to speed on that.
I was a hair's breadth from not making it tonight. So. But speaking of happier things and news,
yes,
how many of you folks are participating in PAX Online? Because there were some big announcements that just came through.
That's right.
I mean,
it was on Saturday, but there's blogs.
Yeah.
There's blogs about it now.
That's true.
And the blogs say, "Oh my gosh, Mwangi expands Lost Elements and Strength of Thousands adventure path in the Magambia, where you're gonna be students and then teachers, and everybody has a free archetype to be magical, and it's gonna be great. And there's 6 ancestries in the Lost Omens book.
It's gonna be really cool." And the Mwangi book is super long, and I know that
It's super long. It's 320
yeah,
pages.
One of the really exciting things about the book and the AP is that all of the folks who were involved in the process really made it a priority to get a lot of diverse voices involved. So I'm really excited to see what they all come up with.
That's right. It's very exciting because all too often you wind up with a book that's about some region in a campaign world that's inspired off of mythology or some other place in the real world, and then all of the authors are completely not from that background. So it's nice when you actually have authors that are more from that background.
Thanks for the hugs, Risky, and Dustin, you're certainly welcome to share in too.
What? Oh yes.
Oh, messages, yeah.
Yes, Dustin is welcome, but dust, I do not want more dust.
We have enough of that. In fact, I think I'm seeing a little bit of haze on the camera there, too.
I kind of am. I think it's a little hazy, and yeah, it's not great, everybody, but it's gonna get better.
Hopefully by next weekend we will be able to...
thanks for giving the gift sub to Risky Alftro. So, those were big announcements.
So we'll need to make notes in a separate thingy bob about the XP to pop in.
Right, because I don't have the other computer open because that extra heat would just be too much. I'm already kind of sweating a little bit. We can't have our AC on because that'll bring in the super smoke air from outside.
Yeah, we have a whatchamadoodle, a
purifier.
No, the other term. The type of AC that we have.
Oh,
a portable air conditioner.
Portable AC.
A portable AC, so it doesn't have the kinds of filters that you.
But here we could potentially put Alftro's XP.
Yeah, no, I was going into the loyalty.
That's an extension.
Oh, extensions, not settings.
It's so hard to find it. It's
the other thing that's on the bottom, right? And not just the sort of bottom. All right, here we go. Loyalty overlay.
And we've got the playtest still going on. If you want to chat about the playtest or the cool stuff about Mwangi Expanse or Strength of Thousands or really anything else with us, we're on tiny.cc/arcanemark. As usual.
XP added.
Here, we can write tiny.cc/arcanemark again in there, Linda, just like we always do.
Tiny.cc/arcanemark.
Yay!
Hey, there we go.
Let's see what it says here. Yeah. Alftro can see the haze from the smoke too. It's not good. So we're gonna be brief. So normally, if it weren't for this, I would want to talk about the Mwangi and the Strength of Thousands more. But I think we need to go.
I would love to talk to you guys about that. On chat.
We can go into a room with the air purifier. So, let's get started on relationships between characters.
Alrighty, yes. Relationships between characters. So, before we do that, let us pretend that I'm going to put these episodes up on YouTube someday.
That's right. I was already doing that.
Well, I wasn't ready. You didn't tell people that the YouTube intro was of dubious veracity.
It's fake.
Alright, here we go.
I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zeiss Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to a very smoky episode of Toolbox, relationships between characters. This was filmed during the time when there was a ton of smoke around, and you can sort of see it around us, so it's going to be short.
Yep.
But it's going to be sweet, because talking about relationships between characters, it's something that without guidance, a lot of new GMs can sometimes run into pitfalls pretty quickly, but if done correctly, it can really enrich your game. And again, this is relationships between characters, not players. That would be a separate topic about players who are in a relationship with each other. And relationships doesn't just mean romantic.
Yes. Family relationships, long-term friendships, and relationships that evolve over time based on... Yes, rivalries, exactly. Relationships that evolve over time based on the events of the story.
So the way that the bonds of relationships bring people together in an adventuring group, or even a larger group than that, is very near and dear to my heart. It's one of the reasons that I wrote like a third-party relationship rules back for Pathfinder 1st Edition, Ultimate Relationships. And I think that essentially when you're figuring out about relationships between characters, you just treat them like people who have their own personalities, their own emotional needs, and just think about that. And there's really three categories of relationships between characters, because there's both player characters and non-player characters, right? So you can have a relationship between two NPCs, a relationship between an NPC and a PC, or a relationship between two PCs. So if you've got two NPCs, that's sort of the most basic. You almost have to have relationships between two NPCs at some point in your story. You're never going to have a story where it's like, nobody has any parents or family that have any relationship with them.
I mean,
they're all just in the void alone.
I mean, maybe they
There's
all
no
have
friends.
Maybe
There's
they all
no
have
romance.
a case of. Maybe they all have a chronic case of PC-itis, where they're like all orphans whose parents died as a part of their tragic backstory, and then they decided to become lone wolves, until the point in which they had to join an adventuring party.
Linda, you always come up with ideas that make me interested in coming up with like a brand new setting. It'll be the setting where every person is a PC who's like that. It's like, we're all orphans. Where did we come from? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Everyone is. Like, the farmer who's out there farming is also an orphan who has no connections to anyone.
Yes.
Think about what that means sociologically for the world. It's interesting.
Like, everyone just remembers, like, at some point they were like, my memories begin when I was 16 years old.
So, assuming we're not playing in Lost People, the setting, there's going to be relationships between NPCs. And those relationships are a great way to help you characterize NPCs. Because we already talked in the episode about creating NPCs, about how you can give personality traits to NPCs. But as an author or playwright or someone like that, when you're characterizing someone, one of the ways you could do it is just by saying, oh, you know, well, this person is evil. But you can also do it with the way they relate to others and the way that others interact with them. And so by determining the relationships between your NPCs and also how they deal with those relationships, you learn so much about your NPC.
And I think that when you talk about like, oh, and this person is evil or whatever, like, it's very rare that you're going to have a character who interacts the same way with everyone. Even if you have a character who's like super evil and treats pretty much everyone like garbage, there's probably still going to be some people that they care about, some people that they're close to. And even if you have a character who generally is very affable, there's probably going to be some people who really get under their skin, who they're not so nice to. So that's something that's important to consider as well. Absolutely.
And so relationships between NPCs are just something that you're going to want to define while you're defining those NPCs. So you say, okay, this lady is the captain of the town guard, but her little brother is actually pretty high up in the Thieves Guild. He was the black sheep of the family, and she is very worried about this fact and is not in contact with him because she's told that she has to arrest him the next time she sees him. Like, just by defining that one familial relationship, are you seeing a bunch of plots that like could all start up just based on that?
And even if you aren't going to have a character like immediately come and be like, oh yes, well, thank you, hello person I've just met, allow me to tell you about my life story and my familial problem. Like that still is going to impact the way that that character interacts with the PCs. They might be troubled or distracted from that, and it may also impact what's going on with others who are in the guard and how all of them are interacting. Because I think that, you know, especially when you say guard, you make me think of guard parentheses 6. Like, you know, there's 6 guards who are in this room, and then they're all like, they don't have names, they don't all have personalities. So even if you're not going to go like fully into the story of all the NPCs, just thinking about like, hey, how does this particular group of guards get along with each other?
Like, you don't have to necessarily where it's like guard parentheses 6 and the PCs are like, oh, I decapitate that one. And then you're like, you've decapitated Barry. He was working as a guard because his little brother is sick with a chronic illness and he needed to get some money to make ends meet. And now you've decapitated him. You don't necessarily have to do that, but...
But, I mean, at least having a sense that Barry and Janice have a rivalry, and that, like, when things go wrong, Janice is going to blame Barry for not properly securing the locks and allowing
like, Barry, this is your fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Then that just gives you a little bit of interesting banter between them. So the relationships between NPCs are useful for the way you portray the world as a living world, and getting to think about the motivations of NPCs based on their relationships.
And who the PCs might be able to... Generally, PCs are much more likely to sort of get engaged in this when it's in terms of who can I ally with to assist me with these interests. So, like, if there's an NPC who really doesn't like another NPC, there's an NPC who really doesn't like the villain that the PCs are going after, then they might want to try to ally with that person. So knowing who works together and who are enemies is important for them.
And Linda is transitioning us also into the fact that, well, we kept saying you might not be able to show the PCs these NPC relationships or not. Well, you know what you can always show? Any relationship that involves the PCs.
Yes.
So we're already using NPC relationships to start a potential NPC-PC relationship.
Yes.
Now, again, this is not only a romantic relationship. Any kind of relationship that an NPC and a PC has, whether it's their relative, whether it's a rival, whether it's someone that they want to get to be a patron against the BBG, like Linda was saying. Those are super interesting and super worth exploring. And that's sort of where the Ultimate Relationships line for Pathfinder 1st Edition, that's where it came in. Because a lot of the basic relationship rules that existed in, say, Ultimate Campaign were more of like the typical computer game relationship system where it's like you give this person flowers and they like flowers as a gift, so that gives them extra, or like I know one of your favorites was Harvest Moon 64, where you could just repeatedly show your dog to this one person
because she likes dogs.
She liked dogs,
but then,
until
like,
she fell in love with you.
Because unlike other gifts where there was like some limitation in how often you could show them things, or like how often they would like these things, like you could, and also time didn't pass the same way when you were inside, so you could just like go find her in the winery and repeatedly show her your dog until she fell in love with you.
Yep.
But I mean, repeatedly showing someone your dog, or like repeatedly giving them the same thing. I think one of the really cool things about relationships in RPGs and tabletop RPGs is that they can get around sort of that trap of like, oh, you know, clearly the way to get this person to like you is to figure out what their favorite thing is and then repeatedly give that to them repeatedly, like constantly. And it can instead portray people in a more nuanced way.
Right. And that's roughly what a lot of simplified relationship systems are about. But for me, I felt that in a tabletop RPG, since you have more nuance, that the right way to have the most fun with a PC and NPC relationship was to do something that's less in the style of a kind of a standard relationship, like, say, a BioWare relationship where you're gathering points, and where the majority of what makes those so cool is that they have all the scripted dialogue that gives plus and minus points, and go for something that's more in the key of Persona, where you have a few particular ranks that each of which has sort of an interesting event or thing that occurs with it, and then you're vaguely gathering points in between those ranks, but the rank ups are distinct and interesting events.
And those are generally points that are that as a GM you generally design those points so that they're things that could be repeated with different PCs. So it's not like, and this one thing happens that would only logically happen once. It might be like, once you get to this certain point, then this person is willing to share this something in this general vein about themselves, and exactly how that plays out may be different for each PC. But like, when they get to this point, they're willing to talk about this aspect of their past, or they share this aspiration, or they try to see if you'll get involved in this organization with them, or what have you.
And the way I had it split out was over 10 ranks, and ranks 4, 7, and 10, the first PC who hit them did a one-off breakthrough with that NPC that could not be repeated, and then there was a replacement that everybody else did that was easier. But obviously, you can set this up however you want, and you don't even need a formalized mechanic like that. But it helps just because it helps you thinking about the relationship with that NPC in a way that you quantify, like levels, in a way that people understand, in a way where you think, they've got to this next one, I should have something interesting and significant happen that deepens the relationship and that causes the PC to understand another facet.
One of the things that this makes me think of too is how in Pathfinder 2nd Edition with diplomacy and things like that, when a PC befriends an NPC, that doesn't represent that NPC deciding that the monolith of the PCs is a group that they like. So thinking about how an NPC might relate differently to the different members of the party is also valuable. Do they trust some members of the party more than others, and maybe won't talk about some certain things when one PC is around? Are they perhaps saying some things to one PC and some things to another PC that isn't exactly the same?
And so that's a little bit about building a relationship with an NPC who you just found. But you also might have a pre-existing relationship. Like, you might write in, my PC's mother is a powerful wizard who lives in this town, and then you go to that town. Or you might write in, like, my PC is that guard whose younger brother is the black sheep who is with the Thieves Guild. And then you encountered that brother later on. So in those cases, it's where it happens with backstory, or it's someone who has a pre-existing connection. It's good for the GM and the player to work together to make sure that they are both happy with the way that NPC is hooked into the world or portrayed. Like,
because sometimes, like, when a player presents a backstory to a GM, they may be saying, "Hey, I really want to see these characters showing up, engaging with the plot." Or they might be upset if, say, the characters from their backstory start coming in a way where they're presented as being someone who might be in danger or someone who might not be entirely sympathetic. So working between the GM and the player. So if you're the player, letting the GM know that. If you're the GM, asking the player to figure out how they want those sort of things from their past to build into the story, and how active a role do they want them to take. And
also on the GM side, the GM might veto certain things. Like, there's a player at PFS who had, like, a backstory that their character was, like, really Aslanti, and their mother was, like, 30th level and had nukes that could destroy all of Golarion with magic or something like that, but lived in space, and people were, like, the way that people generally interacted with that player was that, they're like, yeah, sure you believe that, but... like, if it was a home game, the GM would probably want to establish with the player,
like, these are the
existence or non-existence of this character. This mother who was 20th level mythic with magical nukes, Aslanti, or what have you. So that's sort of NPCs with PCs.
Yeah. So, like, that makes me think of as an example in the War for the Crown game that we were playing. My character has a sister who is a member of a rival faction. I'll just say that. And so I had sort of said to Mark, like, I'm cool with her sister, like, being someone that our party comes into conflict with, or with, like, her running into trouble and things like that, as long as, like, she's not completely and permanently lost. So like we sort of worked that out. So it was like I was cool with if we wound up fighting against her, other things like that. But if she ended up being like permadead because we messed up one thing, then like that wouldn't have been cool with me.
I said in that campaign, no one's dead forever.
Yep.
If you just use your imagination and all the items you get.
If you believe.
Whee! But yeah, PC and NPC relationships can be very fulfilling. We talked about how to set them up, but it is worth noting that once you go beyond NPC relationships where you're just playing all the characters, you start getting into a situation where you might be playing the younger sibling of this person, or the best friend of this person, or their romantic partner. And so you want to make sure that everyone in the group is also okay with the fact that you're role-playing the younger sibling or best friend or parent or romantic partner of the other person.
Yes. I mean, I'd say that when it comes to more romantic relationships especially, it's important to make sure that the group has a consensus on what's going to be acceptable and what are people going to be comfortable with in terms of like portrayal of characters flirting with each other or things like that.
That's right.
Because that kind of stuff can get real awkward real fast.
Like, are they flirting with each other very lovey-dovey, just constantly making remarks? Are there pickup lines? Are there just like randomly badly quoted poetry and play quotes gonna happen? Like, there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
Almost no group is gonna want people to get super explicit about like what physical activities the characters get into, but there's a lot, even just in terms of the way they interact, that it changes and varies a lot, just as it does in movies, TV, other media, it does in games, and it all depends on what people are okay with. And the Pathfinder baseline basically just says don't do graphic depictions of sex, but Pathfinder baseline would generally allow for people who are being romantic. Romance exists in the Pathfinder baseline, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't just figure out with your group, or even just the fact that like someone might want to have a romantic plot and they think they do at first, but then they get weirded out when they are talking to the character and like the GM is the one talking back to them as that character. So you need to be flexible and understanding if they say to you, listen, I said that that my character was complete Cyrano de Bergerac and I want this whole thing, and then now that we're doing though, it's kind of weird. Let's not do it.
And consider we're like mentioned, sort of fade to black is a good technique here. Another one that's good is sort of going from directly portraying the character to saying what the character does. So like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, you know, my character flirts with him, as opposed to like actually fully playing that out.
As opposed to being like, did Nirvana lose an angel?
Oh no, here we go.
Because you are an angel.
Oh dear. Cheesy pickup lines. Go, Larry. Okay.
There you go. Did Heaven lose an angel? Because most of them are in Nirvana, so Heaven could use all the ones they still have.
Is that like the well actually of Golarian pickup lines?
Maybe.
Anyway.
So then we get into PC relationships. So establishing some kind of connection or relationships between some of the PCs to start out with is generally a good idea. Some of the players' guides almost start doing that with some of the for adventure paths. Excuse me. With some of the campaign backgrounds and campaign traits in Pathfinder First Edition. So if everyone is together in like the same mercenary group, or their sibling, or some people are siblings, or some people know each other or work together, that kind of works. I like the idea sometimes, if it's a little weird that they all know each other, of pairing people off in War for the Crown.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a lot of the PCs who like knew one other person and the main NPC who was calling them in.
And that's a good way to have fewer coincidences that have to come together to have all the PCs come together. But it's like these two people came from this area, these two people came from this area, and these two people were already friends with the person who was bringing the group together.
Right.
And then you can play with those dynamics in groups in addition to like individual PC by PC.
Right. But sometimes PCs enjoy having a relationship between their characters that is more than just like they venture together. Like, it's called Shackles. I'm playing Mirani and Hector Ilium, who are brother and sister. Mm-hmm. And they have a very complicated sibling relationship that is both them back and forth and their familiars and their trauma from like a horrible Rusalka who kidnapped them or didn't kidnap, they shipwrecked on her island.
Yeah,
it was her own island.
Yeah.
The point is that is a major sort of role-playing situation that the entire group has to deal with, but it's just me and Linda as all of the characters, so it doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah.
But in another campaign where everyone's there, people might not want to get into as much the Hector and Rin dynamic.
Yeah, and it's definitely something to consider in terms of spotlight. In the same way that if a character has a familiar, then the character and the familiar are talking to each other all the time, that can take a lot of spotlight onto one person. If you have characters that have this existing dynamic, and then they themselves are taking more spotlight, then that can disrupt things. Which is another reason why sort of the paired off system works well, because then it's like, oh yeah, well, if these two characters are whispering things behind everyone else's back, then maybe like this other group of characters is getting suspicious and they're talking about things. So they have
having
sort of
a pair
natural
means that you can actually avoid taking the spotlight, because you can go talk to the other person in your pair just in character while other people are doing something else, which is very, very helpful. And if you have a group of 6, you could have 2 groups of 3 or 3 groups of 2. Like, it's all good. You don't want to leave someone out in the cold unless they really want to be a loner, though. And then, as we're progressively peeling this onion, we're getting to the last one, which is player, and it's a romantic relationship. So, in that case, even though I said this is not about relationships between players, we'll briefly talk about... So, are the players also in a relationship and their characters are in a relationship?
Because that can in some ways be more awkward than anything
than
else.
If they aren't.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes groups where, like, a lot of the players are in relationships with other players, but their characters get in relationships with, like, different characters than the person they're actually in a relationship with, which can be interesting. But if they are in a relationship both in and out of character, that can definitely... That can create some parallels that, like, you might have thought, oh, well, actually, that makes it easier. But it can create some parallels that can actually cause some dynamic issues for your group. So,
yeah. So, like, Mark and I, for example, have not played with our PCs being in a romantic relationship. We've occasionally done things where, like, one of our characters has a romantic relationship with an NPC, but then that's very much something where it's like, oh yes, this is not like something that
while the other one is GMing.
While the other one is while the other one is GMing. Like, this is very much like it's like, oh yeah, this is very much not something that we're going to play out in any degree of detail. It's just going to be like, this character smiles at the NPC or whatever and sort of lets it maybe be implied that there's something else going on, but that for me is not something that I'm comfortable with. Just to have people who are actually in a relationship at the table playing characters who were in a relationship also, that just gets weird to me.
I feel like in Skull and Shackles, where we were the only people, that if Hector wasn't so, like, fried by Blue Hasmane, that whenever he sees an attractive woman flirting with him, he, like, has PTSD, that Tethys trying to flirt with Hector could have potentially led to at least a fling, because she likes to have flings with people every once in a while. But, as it is, he locks up and has PTSD, and so that actually means that he doesn't have a relationship with anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I figure that this is definitely very much a thing where it's important for everyone to talk and make sure that you're working on sort of that same shared baseline of comfort.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I think that it works with PC and NPC in a different way, because with PC and PC, if the players are in a relationship and their characters are in a relationship, it creates this sort of very tightly knit grouping of those two characters that just feels like a unit that can't be pulled apart and that might allow less interaction with the other players. And that's not to say that that actually always happens, and your group might be fine with doing this. You might have a group where everyone are couples in and out of character, and it's great. But you might also consider playing around with that is like, oh, I want to be really connected to the character that is from the person I'm in a relationship with in real life, but let's do brother and sister in the game. Or parent and child, or something else like that. It can be an interesting way to mix things up and still be very close to their character that doesn't have quite some of the same parallels as if you're having the same relationship with them. Then again, there's also situations where you're playing with your actual brother or sister, or you're playing with your actual parent, and you could have characters who are either the same or who reverse it, right? You could have like a kid and a parent who are playing, and the kid is playing the parent of the parent's character.
Well, I did certainly have a fun experience in a game where there where there was a girl who was about 5 years old, and she was playing sort of the older and wiser character.
Familiar.
The older and wiser character who was responsible for making sure that her mom's character wasn't just going off and being irresponsible.
Burning things down.
Yep. When you give a fire-breathing potion to a bearded dragon who wants to be a real dragon, then you can have shenanigans.
And you were saying the little kid was the youngest at the table. She was always like, as the eldest.
As the oldest, I'm in charge. You shouldn't do that. You could start
a fire.
That's a problem.
So, basically what it comes down to is you can massively enrich your game if you include relationships between NPCs and PCs, or PCs and PCs. But don't go into it blind. Don't go into it just running as fast as you can. Go into it slowly and carefully. Figure out what your players are comfortable with, especially if it has to do with romantic relationships, because those can be fraught. And once you figure that out and gauge that out, then go with it. And if you find out that you didn't want what you actually thought you wanted, like I said, there could be a player who was like, this actually feels awkward now that we're doing it. But in the other direction, you could have a player who before said, no, don't make any relationships with my character, but then sees other people doing it and is like, you know what, that's cool, I want to do something like that. Just let it change, be flexible, and that's what it's all about.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up, and I think we both had about as much of the smoke as we can take for right now.
I agree.
So, bye YouTube!
Bye YouTube! See you next time in a less smoky manner. All right.
And, I think
Twitch.
let's just go ahead and wrap down here.
So, let's very quickly, for those of you who came in later, not at the beginning, just to remind you, the playtest is still going on for Summoner and Migas, but also, announced on Saturday at PAX, and also in some blogs, there is a Lost Omens Mwangi expanse with Knowles and Gripply and Anati and the 3 weird ones that, like, James Sutter wrote one sentence about in Lost Omens World Guide. All 6 new ancestries.
Come talk to us about it on Discord.
There's
at tiny.cc/arcanemark.
And there's Strength of Thousands, the Magambia AP, where everyone's students and then teachers and stuff at the Magambia, and you have a multi-class of spellcaster and all sorts of fun things.
Our Saturday episode will either exist or not exist.
We'll let you know how the AQI is going.
If the air quality is not substantially better than it is now, we will not have a Saturday episode.
Yeah, I think that's right. We will just have to cancel it. But supposedly it's getting better on Thursday, so we'll see how it does. Alright, so everyone, as always, stay safe and stay healthy, and we will see you next time.
Bye!
Bye!